In session 4, we unpacked what it looked like for your church to respond and build ministry proactively and in urgent needs, as well as redemptive work in caring for women and men in your community. But in this session, we want to talk about what it looks like for you to walk alongside a woman or man individually who might be having an unexpected pregnancy or past abortion.
Since the fall in Genesis 3, where Adam stood by passively and Eve was tempted, and then they together sinned against God, we've seen this tension brooding. Right? This inability to reconcile relationships between men and women. We see that still today in how the sexual revolution played out in the 1960s, to the rise in pornography by the creation of the internet, and even the feminist movement that creates this dialogue that there's this inequality between men and women. Your ProLife Apologetics is not complete if it begins and ends with, hey, abortion is bad, and parenting is good. Nor do you want all the weight of parenting and pregnancy to be placed on the shoulders of women alone. Typically, when a woman expresses herself in crisis to her loved ones, she will get this response: hey, we will support whatever decision you make. Now, that sounds supportive on the surface, but the undercurrent is saying to her, all the decision-making, the discernment, and ultimately, the consequences are on her shoulders. It conveys to her this message that we won't judge you for taking the life of your child, but we don't have enough skin in the game to help you parent either.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that the same is true in responding to men, and that we're caring for them, we're stepping into that gap that family or friends might leave, and that you feel empowered to speak truth to that situation and care for them, that there is a void, that there are tangible and practical needs for you to meet. And so would you help us just unpack, like, how do you actually walk alongside a woman with an unexpected pregnancy? Like, what have some of your experiences been?
Sure. So I would say start fresh with the foundation and the mindset of you're speaking lovingly to a dear friend of yours. In your resource guide, we will provide specific steps on how to have this conversation winsomely and well with a person experiencing unexpected pregnancy. But recently, I had a conversation with a 19-year-old who was new to the United States. She was an immigrant from another country. She had no support system here, and her only lifeline was that of her boyfriend when she found herself unexpectedly pregnant. And in that moment, he gave her this ultimatum: hey, you stick with me and have an abortion, or you give birth and we walk away from one another. When I met up with her, she was so depressed she wanted to even take her own life. I showed her The Woman's Right to Know. It's a brochure, as you know, that we have here in the state of Texas. There's probably many resources in different states. So I would encourage people to look and see what resource your state has. Inside this brochure is wonderful visuals of the different stages of gestation, and I showed her what her baby looked like at that moment in her womb. She made the courageous decision to choose life and walk away from that relationship. And her son just turned a year old.
Yeah, so that's, man, what an incredibly encouraging story. And yet, at the same time, you recognize, like, there are practical needs that she has. And so, like, what are the top things that you think we need to be prepared for when it comes to, like, hey, these are the things you're going to see on a recurring basis as women turn to you for help?
Right. I can think of a laundry list of stressors that surround a pregnancy, but the top 3 that we typically see are healthcare, transportation, and housing issues.
Yeah, and do you address the, like, hey, are you considering abortion? Do you have that kind of honest conversation at that time, or do you try and avoid the conversation altogether?
Oh, no, definitely. You want to be able to speak into that. And that's what I did with the Texas Woman's Right to Know. In that brochure, there's also a list of abortion risk. And so it enables you to have this conversation to go, hey, if you're thinking about abortion, these are the things that go along with it.
Yeah, I've noticed, even though you shared that story of this guy who just obviously did not make a great decision, was not encouraging or helpful or take responsibility in his part, I think the thing that I've seen is most men are less informed than the women are. Like they don't know what abortion is. They just kind of are told like, hey, you've got to support whatever decision she makes, and don't really understand the influence that they have, not only in making sure they've got people around them that are encouraging them, but also the opportunity they have to tell an expecting girlfriend of like, hey, I'm willing to parent. And what influence that can be on her in making a decision. So talking about then how we support women who've made the choice to have an abortion, and we talked last time about the statistic that 1 in 4 women will have an abortion by the time they're 45, but additionally, 35+% of those women will have multiple abortions. And I don't share that stat to like shock anybody as much or add shame to anyone's situation, as much to realize that we want to be truthful. We want to intervene so that the decision to have an abortion doesn't become a pattern in the future. And so what does it look like for us to step in to those situations and care for those women well?
I just met a woman who is part of that statistic. God intervened into her life. And to this day, she gives $12 a month to a local pregnancy resource center because that $12 represents the 12 abortions that she had. So as you are in a conversation with a woman that's coming to you and confessing to you that she's had an abortion, come from the mindset again that you're talking to a dear friend and realize that you don't have to convict her in that moment of having had an abortion. Right? She is coming to you. See that as a privilege.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit has done the conviction. Like your privilege and opportunity is to then steward what restoration might look like.
Yes. And I would remind her, hey, that abortion is not the unforgivable sin, right? It's not this scarlet letter that you have to bear. And even though you had to go into a side door into an abortion clinic to have your procedure, that's not going to be the case with the church. You are welcome here. God offers hope and healing and forgiveness, and He has the power to do that in your life.
Yeah, I wish that were true of more churches, honestly. I think that could be a great piece of feedback for you as you're thinking about what this means for your church. Is your church a welcoming place where a woman or man with an unexpected pregnancy or a past abortion might see it as the first place they would go rather than the last place? Anything else that you would mention in regards to like the trauma of abortion and what that experience is like?
Sure. The act of abortion is so traumatic alone by itself. Then there's all of these emotions that revolve around that. And it's really just a spiderweb effect from that point on because it affects how, she interacts in her marriage, maybe with the children that she currently has, how she basically does life. I think that a woman commonly thinks, hey, I've had an abortion and I had to do that privately. Versus publicly, which is what is celebrated through pregnancy and parenting. But just reassure her that you're there to bear that burden with her.
Yeah. The passage that comes to mind for both women and men with past abortions is Romans 8:38 and 39, which just Paul's writing to the church there in Rome, to the people of God, and he says, I'm convinced that neither life nor death, angels nor demons, or any powers, height or depth, like there's nothing that can separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. And what a privilege it is to steward that conversation and that relationship and then stand in the gap and know like you have the opportunity to help figure out what resources are needed for those women and men, to encourage them and to think tangibly about, okay, like what are the costs going to be? And am I ready to jump in? And can I be supportive? I mean, you don't get to control the choices that they make from there, but you get to control what options you make available and making sure you're prepared for that.
So what does it look like then to support women before and after pregnancy? Like outside of the church walls, past Sunday morning service, what does that tangibly look like?
Yeah, I admittedly have been hesitant on this because of just trying to discern what the role of an individual is and their responsibility in parenting a child, and then the role of the family to wrap around them and care for them, and then the church's role and what capacity we have to care for those in need, and then the government's role. Because I think what often happens is we sort of skip over these two and go right to, we need the government to solve this. But that's not to say that we can't be more thoughtful about building supportive communities as a whole. And so I think I would just bring up three things. The first would be that I don't think we have to villainize or undermine fatherhood in order to promote the care of women. women and children are going to thrive most when they have a committed husband or man that is in the home, that's caring for his child, that's co-parenting, whatever that relationship might look like. Certainly, we would encourage women and men to be married and caring for one another in that way. Like a child having that stability is best for their development, and we want to prioritize their needs. But additionally, there's things kind of that I would categorize under like education, employment, health insurance, that I think we can be more thoughtful about when it comes to like our schools and our businesses. So certainly if you're watching this and you're a high school or a college student, you need to be informed about Title IX and some of the rights that pregnant individuals have, pregnant women have on their campus, so that they're not losing scholarships or grants or not getting the kinds of opportunities that they need if they're committed to their education, and being a proponent, being an advocate with them to help them achieve their goals and standing in the gap with them. And then you have businesses that I think could be thoughtful about on-site daycares, like even churches that have Mother's Day Out programs or that do daycare throughout or childcare throughout, of making that an employment opportunity for women with unexpected pregnancies or new moms, so that they can both work and provide and be close to their children, especially as they're developing or unsafe. I know that in the realm of foster care, that's a huge issue because you've got a mom who wants to care for her child, but she's got to go work, and she ends up leaving her kids with people that are unsafe or neglecting her children. And that continues to be a cycle related to poverty and some other issues that we have to deal with on kind of that side of things with our ministries here. So paid family leave, maternity, even paternity leave, as we're promoting fatherhood. Those are other things like you should think about your church, of whether or not your church has paid maternity leave for those moms. Like if we're serious about promoting the value of life, then we should be serious about that. We should be thoughtful about what those implications are, so there's not such a high turnover in regards to young moms having to leave their jobs, especially with single parents. I mean, the first 5 years of a child's life are the most critical in their development. So it's not that I just want to say like every child needs to go into daycare, but we should be thoughtful because not every child has both parents. There are lots of single parents dealing with that. Emergency funds for some of our entry-level employees or our lower income employees, where if they've got a car that breaks down or a plumbing issue at the house, like for most of us, we just pick up the phone, we call somebody to fix it. For them, they may miss a week of work because now they don't have transportation. And so what can it look like for your business, your company, to put together an emergency fund to help some of those individuals so that you're also not dealing with the cost of turnover for your business? Like that's a cost to your business, to your company as well.
Right. My husband's a certified financial planner, and he was giving a retirement seminar not too long ago when he was speaking into the topic of emergency funds. And I remember a hand going up in the back. And a woman spoke up and said, "How do you expect me to save an emergency fund? Because I'm a single mom. I'm raising 3 kiddos." And that conversation resonated with me because I thought a lot of women are in our position in the United States, right? They're just barely keeping their heads above water. They're living paycheck to paycheck. How can they even start an emergency fund?
Yeah, so I think our businesses have an opportunity to stand in the gap there. I know certainly our church has a benevolence fund that we use to come alongside, and we encourage our community groups to help support the financial needs of one another. The last thing that I might mention is birth control, and I know that's kind of like a hot topic to bring up, but certainly we would be remiss to not address it. And your church may have churches have various positions on birth control and how comfortable they feel about talking about it. But I think I want to mention 2 things. The first is that we're committed to the value of children in families. And so this isn't to say like, hey, yes, birth control all the time, always, or anything like that. But then the other would be that we're committed to men and women and sex being reserved for marriage. So with the potential of abortion being abolished in our country, I think there's going to continue to be a push towards birth control being kind of the solution for unexpected pregnancies. And if you're interested about what insights we've kind of developed and how we're guiding young couples who are planning to be married or young married couples, I would encourage you to take a look at what we've developed with our ministry. It's you can go to watermark.org/TLI and scroll down to the equipping section, because I would certainly say that married men need to take more responsibility in this role, since there are very similar contraceptives for men as there are for women, but we seem to like wholesale just pass that off to women and said, hey, that's going to be on you. The last thing that I would just chime in is I'm concerned about what happens the day that abortion is abolished. Like, is the pro-life movement going to lose its zeal for caring for women? And making sure that we're thoughtful about holistic wraparound care in our communities and addressing the gaps that exist.
Your next faithful step is to see how welcoming and accessible your church is to having conversations with women who are experiencing unexpected pregnancies and those who have abortion as part of their story. If a woman who was pregnant were to look at your website, would she be conveyed the message that you're willing to have a conversation with her? If a woman who's had an abortion comes down front after a Sunday morning service and makes that confession, are you able to counsel her in that moment? Remember, we all have room to grow as we care for women in our own communities.